What's up guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and for this week's video I thought it might be fun to talk about the top 12 places I've traveled to. And so far I've just been to North America, Europe, and Asia, hoping to add to the list in the future. And my perspective is that of a budget traveler. I don't live extravagantly, so this is all based on my experiences traveling to these places, how I felt when I was there, and it was tricky to kind of rank them and put them into a list because they're so different from each other, it's hard to compare. But I tried my best, so let's just jump into it. Number 12 on my list is Yellowstone National Park. So I visited Yellowstone with my family as a kid, and I think it was one of the first trips I was old enough to really appreciate where I was and what I was seeing and experiencing. And we did go to multiple places on this trip, but Yellowstone and the Devil's Tower in Wyoming left the biggest impression on me. The geological features that are in this park are just something else. There's geysers and hot springs. All of it kind of sits on top of like a volcanic hotspot. So there's just a lot going on. Really, really cool to see as a kid. We didn't do a whole lot of traveling as a family when we were kids, so being able to drive from Las Vegas to a few different states and kind of seeing national parks that were within the vicinity, that's what we did as a family, and that was definitely one of the coolest parks we visited. So highly recommend checking it out, especially if you have a family with kids. There's so much to learn in the process. It really is a cool experience. I think being there kind of kick-started this whole adventurous side of me wanting to explore and experience and see new things, and so it really was a meaningful place for me to visit, and if you haven't been there, you should put it on your bucket list. And number 11 on my list is London, England. So when we flew to London, it actually kicked off our 2015 trip to Europe. We had never been to Europe before, and we wanted a easy transition into being there, and it was also one of the cheapest places to fly into at the time. As a West Coast girl who's from Las Vegas, a relatively new city, one of the first things you feel when you're there is just how old it is and how historic it is. There are so many historical sites that you can see, museums, there's so much to do. So one of the best things about it is that there are so many things you can do and see that are within a close proximity of each other. We crammed so much into the few days that we were there. We even saw a musical. We even went to Harry Potter World, which is north of London. Obviously, it's better if you can extend your trip and kind of enjoy yourself more, not feel like you're in such a big hurry, but we were able to do it, and it was a really cool place to visit and really cool first city on our big Europe trip. I do recommend it as a first stop if you are visiting Europe for the first time. Number 10 on my list is Barcelona, Spain. So this was also part of our 2015 trip, and it was the first kind of warm place that we had visited on the trip. And just walking around the streets of Barcelona, it felt so lively. There was so much culture. It just felt like such a warm place to be, figuratively and literally. And we walked over to a beach and we swam in the sea, and it was just such a wonderful experience. Really unique architecture that you can see all over the town. The food we had was really good, and we were pescatarians at the time on that trip, so there wasn't a huge variety of things we could have, but we enjoyed what we had when we were there. I think in general it is worthy of the hype that it gets. It was a beautiful, lively place to be. And my next two on my list are very interchangeable. It is really hard to kind of put one on top of the other. I love them both, so here we go. Number 9 on my list is the West Coast of the USA. So I have a very personal relationship and soft spot for the West Coast. My dad's side of the family settled in California, and then most of the family has stayed in the vicinity since. My aunt did live in Washington for a while. So my favorite parts of the West Coast are Northern California and the Washington area, but just making that drive up the Pacific Coast Highway from Southern California to Washington really is one of the most beautiful drives you could ever do. You should definitely do it at one point in your life. There is so much beauty in Northern California. You have the redwoods, you have these national parks that are incredible, but I am especially fond of visiting Northern California because that's where my grandparents lived. Just kind of exploring Santa Rosa, California was just like such a dream as a child. You know, they'd take us to an ice skating rink and I learned how to skate there. Just going out for ice cream, just doing anything was just such a wonderful thing that I will always treasure. Everything is so hilly there and green and pretty, and it just felt like just the opposite of Las Vegas, and I think that's why I liked it so much. But obviously I can't forget to mention that one of my favorite places in the world to ever be at a given time is Disneyland here in Southern California. I am a kid at heart, what can I say? But really, California itself is one of the most diverse states geologically, if not the most. It really has so much going on. Cliffs and oceans oceans and you have deserts and forests, and it really is just so incredible. So if you can't tell, it does feed my soul to be here and to live here, and I am happy to call this place my home currently. But I also can't leave out how beautiful Oregon and Washington are to visit, especially Washington. And every time I'm there, it is just such a beautiful place to be. The trees, the forests, they're so much thicker than they are further south down here. And it's just, it feels like you're in a magical, mystical place. And I could definitely see myself living there someday. What a beautiful place to be. And number 8 on my list is the New England area. So I also have a soft spot for the New England area, especially New Hampshire, because James's family is from New Hampshire. And I think New Hampshire is one of the most underrated states. I think New Hampshire gets overshadowed by Maine, and you know, there's so much going on in the Massachusetts area because of Boston, but New Hampshire truly is such a beautiful state. Even though it doesn't have much of a coastline, I feel like it has all these like hidden secret lakes that are small and you just would never know that they're there, and they're just absolutely beautiful. It just has a kind of peace that you can't find anywhere else. I can't even describe it to you because I don't know how. You're just gonna have to experience it yourself. And some really solid people come out of the New England area, you know what I mean? I feel like even just hearing a stranger, you know, with a New England accent, you know, maybe they say something like, oh, it's wicked hot, and you're just like, yes. I don't know what it is, but it's just like such a delight. New England people, some of the best. Mwah. That's why I married one. But anyways, I totally could see myself living there someday as well, maybe retiring there. What a dream it would be to live in the New England area, especially in New Hampshire. Number 7 on my list is the Bahamas. So for our honeymoon, we went to Florida and then took a cruise to the Bahamas and back. And unfortunately, we didn't get to spend much time there, which is just like an evil trick. So I don't feel like we got a nice, thorough grasp of what it feels like to visit the Bahamas. We just kind of got a taste of it doing excursions off of the cruise ship, and I would love to go back and really spend more time there. But in the time that we were there, I will say that the sand and we visited kind of like a remote island, and the sand and the water was just unlike anything I've ever seen. Definitely the best, I would say the best kind of beach, ocean island. I mean, I haven't really been to a ton of islands, but this was the best I've ever experienced. We went snorkeling and saw coral reefs and colorful fish. It was like living in a dream. I will never forget how it felt to be in that water and just to see all of those beautiful things. I had never gone snorkeling before, so my brain was just like exploding as I was looking at beautiful fish. Definitely something you have to do at some point. It really is worth it. And even when we weren't doing that, I think we were swimming in a pool that was like right by the water, and it just kind of looks like the pools, you know, become one with the ocean. It's just like incredible. And the people were so cool. I just hope that someday we'll be lucky enough to go back and get to do more, because it was just like a dirty trick. It's like someone dangling a little thing in front of you and being like, come over here, but you don't get to do much while you're here. I wanted to so maybe someday we'll be able to remedy that. Number 6 on my list might be a little bit of a surprise, but it is Vancouver, Canada. Visiting Vancouver was one of the most surprising things I think I've experienced. It is so underrated, and I think it has to do a lot with our first impression of it. So if my memory is correct, I feel like we were driving in, we kind of like round a corner, and then you're just like, bam, hit with this skyline that is unlike anything I've ever seen. It is so many different things all at once. You know, you have this city with really tall buildings, and what's crazy about it is that it is in front of huge mountains that are like topped with snow, and there's water too. It's just like such a juxtaposition of all of these different things that I didn't know could exist all at once in such a all confined in that space. I can't even speak correctly. It was just so strange and beautiful and stunning. I was like, what? I don't think I took any pictures of it. I was probably just like, my jaw was dropped, like truly the coolest skyline I've ever seen. But one of the coolest places that we visited while we were there was the Capilano Suspension Bridge Park. It is within the area and it is stunningly beautiful. So that area is all a temperate rainforest, and I had never been to a temperate rainforest before, but it is legitimately cool. The bridges kind of spanning this area, it's just so stunning. It was raining and trickling while we were there, and I feel like it added to the experience. experience. There was fog. It just seemed so like mystical. You definitely have to check it out if you're ever in the Vancouver area, but there is a lot to do within the city as well. We wanted to kind of enjoy the nature and stuff, so we rented bikes and we kind of rode around this island area. It was really cool. Vancouver really has so much to offer because you can have this city life, but then there's nature right outside your doorstep. I think I've read that people of Vancouver have a really high quality of life, and it's like, duh, obviously when you go there, you're like, okay, I get it. I legitimately wish I could live in Vancouver. We have actually like looked up the process of like, how do you move to Canada from America? But we have like no skills to offer, so they would not want us there, I'm sure. But it is a awesome place. Highly recommend you check it out sometime. And number 5 on my list is Paris, France. Paris. How do I describe Paris? It definitely does have kind of this romantic air about it. I don't think it's quite how they like portray it in the cartoons and that sort of thing, but there is something really special about the city. Now, when we visited, we stayed in an Airbnb, and I highly recommend doing that when you can, because there is something really special about putting yourself kind of in the shoes of a local temporarily and kind of just like waking up in their place and then going outside, and like maybe you go to the nearest cafe and you get like a croissant and a latte, which is what we did. Maybe that's really cliche and no one in Paris actually does that. Even just getting little bites to eat and stuff while we were there. Like we went to a street cart, I think, and just got like a couple of savory crepes. And that was like the best crepe I've ever had in my entire life. And I will never forget that. And just doing that, like not even necessarily going to a sit down restaurant and having like escargot and like all of these fancier things, like I will never forget that crepe. Why? And like if you were to go wander off into kind of like a random neighborhood that's kind of off the beaten path, like doing stuff like that and not necessarily like all the things that you typically would think of when you visit Paris, those are some of the things I enjoyed the most. However, I did enjoy visiting those places that everyone wants to see, like the Eiffel Tower and, you know, Notre Dame and all of, you know, the Louvre. Those things were cool, but they didn't like mean as much to me as just kind of like walking around the city and just kind of like getting the feel for it. So the overall kind of Parisian experience we had was very lovely. So in a lot of ways, I do think Paris is worth the hype that it gets, but maybe not in the ways you'd expect it to. As a side note, getting to the top of my list is super stressful because they are all so like kind of on the same level, and this is hard. So number 4 on my list is the Philippines. So as a heads up, I might cry on this one. Hope you're ready for that. Visiting the Philippines, oh my God, am I already crying? Okay, so visiting the Philippines was one of the most, if not the most meaningful and special vacations I have ever had the opportunity and privilege to go on. And my perspective of visiting is definitely a unique one that probably not a lot of people can relate to, but I went there primarily to meet my family on my mother's side for the first time. And this was in 2019, very recently, and I had never been there previously. Long story short, it was just kind of not really an option for us to travel there. As a family growing up, it is very expensive to travel internationally, and my mom was just kind of terrified of the idea of bringing us there because it is a third world country and there is some crime. I think she was probably a lot more paranoid than she needed to be, but that's how she felt. So it, you know, we couldn't go until we were old enough to, you know, make it happen on our own. So I finally got to go, and it was such an amazing experience. I think the Philippines is super underrated as a destination to visit. I think a lot more people should consider visiting. It is an incredible country. And although Manila was cool to see, you know, it is a big city and it's impressive, I think visiting the other islands was really cool because you're getting such a different perspective on what the country is like. Now, I believe in the middle there are some very touristy islands that are very catered to, you know, having people visit that are really beautiful, and they're all about the beaches and, you know, just kind of living life on the beach. We didn't go to those islands, but someday it would be cool to check them out. My favorite part of the trip was actually visiting the southernmost island of Davao, because that is where I met with most of my family, and they are located in kind of the Davao City area, and I feel like visiting Davao City felt a lot more of kind of like an authentic experience visiting the Philippines, and, you know, kind of getting together with my family and, oh no, having that big you know, I can't even call it a reunion because I had never met most of them. But that was incredibly special and I will never forget that. But like, not only because they're my family, like I have to say that the just Filipino people are so hospitable and warm and funny and just like all of these things at once. So much personality. I feel like the Filipino people get so overlooked in so many ways, you know, in so many industries. I could make a whole nother video about this. Obviously, I have a personal relationship with this, but I will not get into that today. But yes, the best part of that trip was being with my family, experiencing things with them, getting to know them in the short amount of time that I was there, and just kind of having fun with them and kind of catching up in the way that we possibly could while we were there. So one of the highlights of the trip was visiting this area called Eden with my cousins. It is a beautiful park that is kind of in the area, and there's so many kind of fun activities you can do, but just the area itself is just stunning. Unlike anything I've ever seen before. I even caught a fish for the first time, albeit it was, you know, they make it a lot easier for you, so essentially you have to do nothing. But we had a good meal together. We had a lot of fun riding a few rides while we were there. There was even fun, quirky things like this upside down house where we went and we took all these silly pictures, and it was just such a blast. Like, I had so much fun with my cousins. All in all, whether you have cousins or relatives there or not, such a wonderful, delightful place to go. Definitely consider visiting the Philippines. There's so many different options of islands you can go to, and we went to a few and it was wonderful. So highly recommend you consider visiting the Philippines in the future if you have never been. All right, so number 3 on my list is Venice, Italy. Venice is also one of these places that I can say, you know, it kind of worth the hype that it gets for sure. Now, when we went, it was kind of rainy and gloomy, but it didn't really take away from the experience at all. Venice also has this kind of romantic air about it that I can't really define. This was also a destination where we stayed at an Airbnb while we were there. It was a really cool one, and doing that really just kind of adds to the experience of being there. You know, you just kind of open your door and you're within the streets and canals of Venice. I can truly say that Venice, Italy, not a bad place to get lost and kind of have no idea where you are. Now, I'm not usually one to say, you know, splurge and do all of these things, but I do think that doing a gondola ride, that was really something very special and memorable when we were there. Also, I will say they typically don't sing when you're, you know, on a gondola ride. I'm not really sure how that became a thing that just like everyone believes, but for the most part, they don't sing. Sorry. But that doesn't mean that it's not an awesome experience being on a gondola ride and talking to your gondolier. That was one of the coolest parts of the whole trip, was that we got to talk to our gondolier. He was really friendly. His name was Niccolo, and he was like a 4th generation gondolier. He was telling us like, I live over here and like this is what I do and this is my life. And we were like, so like, tell us everything. We loved it. Like, what a cool guy and what an awesome experience he made for us being our gondolier. So the people of Venice are so cool. Being there was such a treat, so I highly recommend you go there, put it on your bucket list and make that happen. And also, if you're in Italy, gelato. Moving on to the top 2. And my top 2 are very interchangeable as well and had a lot of similar aspects to them, but let's just jump into it. Number 2 on my list is Dublin, Ireland. So Dublin had a very different feel to a lot of the cities that we visited on our trip to Europe. It was the second country and second major city that we visited while we were there. And while there are a lot of similarities between kind of your Irish culture and your English culture, there's this kind of like quaintness and humble feel to Ireland and to Dublin that felt so appealing to me. It felt more relaxed being there. I kind of had this peaceful feeling that is hard to define. And I mean, Dublin is old too. I mean, there are some parts that are even kind of, buildings are crumbling a little bit, but there was something so beautiful about walking the streets of Dublin. And it's funny because I feel like people think of, you know, the Irish and, you know, Irish pubs and drinking and all of that, a very big, heavy party, you know, kind of people and place. And I will say that we are definitely not into that kind of stuff. So there is kind of a separation there automatically. And we went into a couple of the famous bars and they were still appealing to us. And I hate bars. So I don't know what that's about, but that does say something because I really hate bars. I feel like with these top 2 options, I really have a hard time trying to articulate why these places felt so meaningful and powerful to me. But I will say that there is something about the music that we would hear walking around, you know, people singing or playing instruments. I feel like that does a better job of kind of like showing you how it felt. The kind of music that we heard there was just so fitting and felt so appropriate. So we would love to visit Ireland again someday, and hopefully next time we'll be able to kind of venture more outside of Dublin and explore there, because we did get a taste of that and it was nice, and we'd like to come back for more.
As the light declines, I remember Dublin city, the railroad ties.
Okay guys, so number one on my list was a big surprise to us when we visited there, and probably will be a surprise to you, but it is actually the area around Stockholm, Sweden. Specifically, we stayed in the town of Marsta, which is north of Stockholm. And what's funny about this is that this was actually kind of like a layover. It was the very tail end of our trip, and it was our last stop. It was actually cheaper to fly out of Sweden back to the US, and so we decided to just go ahead and do it. And we were like, hey, we have enough time to go into Stockholm, do a few things, see a few things, and then go back and stay in Marsta for the night, and then we fly out the next morning. So we really only got to have about half a day to take in this area of kind of Stockholm, Sweden. And in just those few hours of being there, I can really only describe it as like, it was a magical feeling to walk around. I don't know why. I think something that has to do with it is that it is the farthest north on the globe we've ever been. And there is something about being in a climate or, you know, a kind of environment that's so different from anything you've experienced before, where even like the vegetation and, you know, just kind of how the air felt and just everything around you, just kind of a little different from anything you've ever seen and felt before. And something about all that was definitely appealing to us. We only got this tiniest glimpse of Marsta. We were staying in a hotel there, and even like just walking to the rail station, or, you know, to go into Stockholm, and just like looking down at the ground, like even the ground looked magical to me, like from a fairy tale. There was something so quaint and peaceful about being there, where I was truly like, I think I have found the place I want to live the rest of my life. I don't know why we're like this. You know, we have often lived in cities, but there's something so appealing about these kind of smaller towns where there's less hustle and bustle, and it is more quiet and peaceful and just like soothing. And maybe we just need to be in therapy or something, but that's like what I want and desire. But even in Stockholm, you know, it being a major city, in a lot of ways, a lot kind of felt newer and like more updated or whatever than a lot of cities we had been to on our trip in Europe. Even something about that felt very kind of magical to us as well. I feel like one of the best ways I can put it into words is like, it felt like Christmas. It felt like the holidays there. And I don't think that's necessarily because it was cooler. It was the coldest place we had been to on our trip. I think at this time it would have been the very tail end of September, early October. It just had this kind of coziness that felt so welcoming, and like, you know, everyone was celebrating something, but in a subdued, relaxed, happy, content way. That's really the best way I can articulate how I felt being there. And just the combination of all of that really won over this West Coast girl and a New England boy. But definitely, if you ever have the chance to go to Sweden, don't hesitate, make it happen. There is something really delightful about being there. And the people there were awesome too. I feel like there's just kind of this subdued likability about them. I can't say that anywhere I have visited the people were crap. And lastly, I do want to give an honorable mention to Athens, Greece. Athens has some incredible historical sites that are some of the oldest you can see. We had good food while we were there. The people are warm and hospitable. But if we ever get the chance to go back to Greece, we will definitely want to explore more of the islands. So hopefully we'll get to check that out someday. All right, guys, that concludes my list of top 12 places I've visited. I would love to know your favorite places. Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, you may want to check out my video on tips for traveling internationally. It should be right here. And if you are enjoying my content, I hope you will consider liking and subscribing to my channel. But that's gonna do it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching, and see you later.